Hey everyone, with Path of Radiance out for Nintendo Switch Online, it is great to see a lot of people getting into Path of Radiance, a game that I really enjoy. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because I saw a lot of people talk about Volke online, and this particular thread about a person was like, hey, should I hire a Volke? I don't know, I'm not sure about it. And I want to talk about the kind of advice that the community gives to new players about units in Fire Emblem, what we should tell them, what we shouldn't tell them. I want to talk about Volke and how he's a bit overrated and how the game kind of goads you into that. Let's talk about what the guy actually asked of the community. He said, alright, I'm playing in chapter 10 of Path of Radiance, and I don't know what to do with Volke. He seems suspicious, but I need stronger units given how weak the recruits from last chapter were, and having a thief that can lockpick is always helpful. But he said he charges 50 gold per lock. Plus, given how weak recent recruits have been, sorry to Mr. Rolf supporters, but they just joined so underpowered that they're not worth it. I don't even know if it is worth it. A few things to note: it's a blind playthrough, please no spoilers, I'm playing on hard, and no one has been killed so far. So please give me advice. So I guess the first question is, what kind of advice do you give this player on this? Well, first of all, I think it's good to note that someone pointed this out in the comments, the game actually gives you the option to ask advice from the game. I don't know if he actually did that, if he found that advice unhelpful, but that's always a good idea to start. So Volke, for experienced players already noticed, but Volke has no drawbacks for hiring whatsoever. He'll come along with you and actually give you a bit more backstory that you can get, so there's no reason to click don't hire. He charges gold for just about everything he does, including picking locks. He doesn't charge gold for actually coming along and spending all his time with your company. So you can't just hire him and there's no drawbacks to that. And a lot of the comments pointed out, like, yeah, just recruit the unit. In Fire Emblem, there's almost never a drawback to recruiting units. I guess almost is kind of scary thing to say because you don't know when there is a drawback, but in this case there really isn't one. But Volke is meant to look suspicious, so that's why you have the option to not hire him, which is a very cool story bit that they do in Path of Radiance. So my advice would be to say, yeah, hire him, there's no drawback. And then when it comes to Volke, I would recommend only using him for thievery and almost no combat if you can, because Volke's combat isn't very good. In fact, after reading this thread, I'm convinced that Volke's combat is actually very bad and heavily overrated by the community at large. And the reason that is because Volke has very good, not even very good stats, pretty good stats, but then really, really awful weapon types. And what the community often fails to do, I think, or what the community often failed to used to do, like 10, 20 years ago in the community, was adding things up, looking at the whole picture rather than a thing in and of itself. And you can kind of see this exemplified in the discussion. Like you see right here, our GOAT, Don level 1, is like, yeah, Volke is like worse at combat than Rolf. We'll get into the exact numbers here in a little bit too, because I was actually surprised to see him say this, but you can see that. And there's someone arguing with like, no, Volke's got solid combat stats. The issue is just that his weapons have very low might. As long as he's not going against high defense enemies, he's a very solid Myrmidon type character early on. He's basically Mia on steroids. At base, he's got a ton more strength and a lot more HP and skill. Both at level 10, the only thing Mia beats him on is speed. Zyhark was recruited several chapters later. It's one chapter later. At base, has less strength and only beats Volke in speed. I guess maybe he means later than Mia, but Zyhark literally joins like a couple seconds after Volke, basically. And very soon, if you invest a few levels into Volke, he'll be an effective dodge tank. He's also got better crit, thanks to the +5 crit on the knife. Don't get me wrong, he's not one-running most enemies, but he can certainly do some damage and keep himself alive, which is useful. I'm not going to read this whole argument between Don and this guy, because it gets kind of in the weeds, and you're not here to watch me read Reddit comments. But there's a lot of like, Donna was like, hey, here's these numbers, and then this guy's like, no, and he kind of, in my opinion, moves the goalpost a little bit, and is like, nah, he's good, Volke is dodgy, he's got good stats, but what are these stats actually? What does it actually look like? Fortunately, there's a good way to look at this, which is Ninian bot. It's a Discord bot that lets you look at Fire Emblem stats all around. Before I dig into the numbers, I do want to say, of course, you can use Volke if you like. It's fine, especially he's for fun. Like, there's no reason not to use Volke if you like him a lot. But if someone's asking for advice, especially a new player, on how to use units, I think it's good that we give him advice that is helpful and accurate to what they can expect to experience from a character. And saying Volke is good combat, I think is just not true. It just isn't. You could argue it depends on where you put the bar, because yeah, if you compare Volk to like optimized strategies, like I don't know, Titania Realm running everything with a hand axe, it's gonna look bad, but so does 90% of the cast. But even if we compare Volk to very average or even below average characters, he still doesn't look good. He still looks pretty bad, as I'm about to show. And I think for new players especially, it's nice to give them rough guidelines on how good a character is, because I don't want them to make the game harder or more tedious for themselves. That we say, okay, you're going to use this unit, and like if you're going to use Volk, you can expect this combat to be kind of below average. You can expect this combat to not do a whole lot of damage. You can expect him to be a little on the weak side, but if you enjoy him, that's okay. But just be ready for this guy to not one-shot enemies until very, very much later. I think that is a much better way to set expectations, to be like, yeah, you can use this unit, you just have to invest in a ton of them, and then he was fine for me. Like, that doesn't really help them towards anything. And it's fine if Volk is your favorite. You can use him if you like. In fact, it's not even that hard to use him, but it's good to know that he's on the bottom end of the spectrum when it comes to combat. That way you know what to expect. So, for example, you got Ninian Bot over here. I'm not the best user of Ninian Bot ever, but first, if we take a look at Volk from FE9 at base, this just shows his stats, which is kind of what the game does to you too. You'll be like, all right, you got your 12 strength, and you got your 13 speed, and you see his growth. They're like 50 to 60 in all the most important stats like HP, strength, skill, speed. Not a whole lot of defense, but that's what we expect of a thief, right? So it's fine. So all this looks okay. Like if we compare him real quick to FE9 Ike at around a level, he's probably level 12 at this point or something. And then we can compare him to Volk at base. You can see that their stats are not that far apart. Ike is like more HP, less strength, magic, whatever, equal speed. Ike is a bit more defense, but they're not that far apart. And if your Ike is a different level or a different RNG Scrooge, then they're kind of equalish, right? Another example would be someone brought up Mia earlier, so we'll do that. So we'll do like Mia at 12 and Volk. I don't know what level Mia would be at. 6 levels might be a bit too much for her at this point. So you can see that Volk has a bit more strength, like quite a bit more strength actually. 3 strength is a lot when you're double attacking. Mia's a lot faster with 4 extra speed. And that's the biggest difference between them. Everything else is relatively equal. So that's those two. Another character that joins soon is, of course, Zyhark. We can compare him at base because the chapter that Volk joined in, if you're stealthing through it, you're probably not going to do any combat. Maybe against the boss. You can fight the boss in chapter 10 without triggering stealth. But Volk will probably be a base level, and Zyhark joins almost right away in the next chapter. So we compare them at base too. You can see here once again that Volk has 2 more strength over Zyhark, but Zyhark is a little bit faster. They have equal defense. Those are the most important stats to compare units generally. They have the same HP. They have the same defense as well. So they're very, very similar. These are also all characters that only use swords, which means we don't have to do any comparisons about like 1 to range or anything. We could take a character that does have 1 to range. We can take a character that joins alongside there, like Kieran, which may be a little bit unfair because Kieran is very good, but just to have a general idea of where Volk stands. So you can see that Volk actually is only a little bit faster than Kieran, plus 1 speed over him. Kieran has 5 more HP and 3 more defense, which results in a lot more enemies that it takes to take Kieran down. And this is Kieran at base before he like uses his growth, because you can also compare growth with Ninian. You can see Kieran has 20% more defense growth. Volk actually has a higher HP growth, which is very funny. But Volk does get a lot faster, to be fair. Now, what can happen is you can look at these stats and think, well, Volk doesn't look like he's very far apart from his peers. There might be units that are better than him, but he's not like super terrible compared to them, right? But we haven't factored in his weapon type at all, and that's very important. Like you don't go into combat with just your stats. You go into combat with weapons that you can use, and Volk can only use knives, which are low might, locked to 1 range, and they cannot be forged, crucially. You can only forge 1 weapon per chapter, but most units are going to have access to a forged weapon at some point in the game. Eventually you have 1 or more for everyone. And it just turns out that if you use a forged weapon, then Volk's stats look a lot worse. Even if we don't forge the weapons that we use, Volk already looks a bit worse, by the way, because knives are just that weak. Like, just being able to use a steel sword alone is enough to, like, hurt him. Let me start with that, actually. So if we look at Volk again, we'll compare it to Zyhark. But we'll give Volk a knife, and we'll give Zyhark a steel sword. Not even the killing edge, just a steel sword. You can see here that Zyhark already has 4 more attack. They're still equally fast. And yeah, Volk has more hit and more crit. Most of the time, I think you'll find this doesn't really matter all that much. They're both going to hit their targets. And 5 crit is such a low amount. You can't rely on him to crit anything that Zyhark wouldn't crit. And yeah, it's just not going to change anything. 4 attack is way more important in this equation because doing 8 more damage per double attack is just so much. So you can see already that there's a big gap between them without even considering forges. Now, what if we forged Zyhark's Steel Sword? We would add +5 might to it. I can't do forges in Minion, I don't think. I don't even know how we could do that. I can try this real quick. Yeah, it doesn't really work. But you can forge 5 might onto a weapon for relatively cheap. And since you can only forge 1 weapon per chapter, it's a good idea to just invest as much into a weapon as possible, as long as you're not wasting gold on something that doesn't matter, like hit. Usually crit isn't worth it either. So just add like 5 attack power to a Steel Sword, and he'll not have a 4 attack lead, but a 9 attack lead. So Zyhark is going to one-run enemies. Similarly, if you take Ike again with a Steel Sword. Okay, so you can see with the Steel Sword unforged, again, +4 attack for Ike. So same attack as Zyhark, basically. +5 from the forge will make that 23 attack. So Ike is just much stronger per hit. It's insane. And this just goes on. This goes for every unit that can use forged weapons, which is really just anyone but Volk and then later Soth and I guess the Laguz. But even Laguz are kind of much better than Volk, I think. If you compare Volk with a knife to Lethe with, I think her Pokemon is called Claw. Claw Cat. Like, look how much better Lethe is at base. She's got 12 more attack with her Claw, and then she's also faster by 2 points. And that's, like, a lot of people don't even like Lethe. But she also is much better at combat than Volk. If you want to get really sad, we can compare Rolf with a knife to Rolf with a steel bow, or I guess an iron bow. And Volk look much better here. But now imagine that we forged this iron bow to +5, and now we'd have more attack than Volk. Volk still has better stats all around than Rolf, but Rolf is the character with the worst stats at that point, and probably for the whole game if you give him all equal amounts of experience. Even though Rolf is on a level, it will be really hard for him to catch up. He can do it, but it takes more resources than other characters, and that's why he's usually not considered very good. But like the fact that Volk's attack power is worse than Rolf with a forged iron bow, not even a forged steel, but a forged iron, I think says a lot about how bad knives make Volk's attack. And another piece of advice that I saw in that Reddit thread was, well, you can make Volk's attack, you can make Volk better by like waiting a bit, investing in him, giving him bonus experience. And specifically the act of giving him bonus experience, I think is bad advice to give to new players. Not because it will soft lock them, you can't soft lock a Volk player because he'll just lockpick his way out, I got him. But because Volk has a cap, a level cap, that almost every other character in the game doesn't have. He doesn't promote if you hit him to level 21. Unlike everyone but like Ike and Soth and Laguz, I guess. But everyone else I've mentioned up to this point, like Rolf, like Zyhark, like Mia, like people like Kieran, Oscar, Boyd, anyone really that is unpromoted still, they hit a big power spike when it promotes that Volk doesn't get until later in the game because of story reasons. You cannot promote Volk whenever you want him to, so you get less bang for your buck if you put bonus experience into him, and his good growth that I highlighted earlier do not make up for this in any way whatsoever. So if you look at like Volk at level 20, he looks like this. He's got 31.5 HP, 17 strength, 18 skill, 20 speed, 9 defense. You can see the only really good stats that he has are strength, skill, and speed, and those are just good stats for unpromoted units. Even if you get lucky with Volk, you cannot get higher than 20 because most, if not all, unpromoted stats that matter here cap at 20. I think luck caps at 30 in this game, and then HP caps at 40, maybe 45, depending on the class. But even a lucky Volk wouldn't have more than this. Just like in case someone wants to bring up like getting lucky with their Volk or getting RNG bliss, you're not going to have more than 20 speed on your Volk unpromoted. Whereas other units can promote and get higher stats. Not Ike, of course. Like, I'll admit, like, sure, Ike isn't very good either in this regard. He's still better than Volk because he can still like have better stats. But just like for the sake of comparing a promoted unit to Volk, just to see how big it is that you can have access to that. 21, to Volk, and we will add the weapons. So I'll once again do a steel sword and a knife, because again, Volk doesn't get any better weapons than knives. I'm sorry, that's the other problem with knives. You don't get any good upgrades. Like, you don't get a steel knife or a silver knife in this game. You just get a knife. He does get to be level 20 though. Let's not be too unfair to Volk here. So this is a level 21 Zyhark as a swordmaster, and this is just Volk level capped as a thief. And you can see Zyhark still keeps that 4 attack lead here, which will be again a 9 attack lead if we factor in the Forged Steel Sword. He has a 3 attack speed lead. Again, worse hit, that doesn't really matter, and then worse crit by 4. And this is factoring in the fact that knives have 5 crit, by the way, just in case we forgot about that. So you can see Zyhark blows him out of the water, and Zyhark isn't even considered the bestest unit in FE9 ever. This is just a random unit that can promote that's sort of comparable in join time to Volk, and he's just so much better. Who else exists? Mia, same thing. Steel sword, Volk, 20, knife. There you go. Mia is stronger. Mia is not a particularly strong unit. Like, attack strength wise, she's not that powerful. But 7 attack lead if you consider Steel Sword Forges. And then also faster than Volk and everything else. And Volk just can't do this. And this is like just when they hit their power spike. But units are not going to hit 21 and stop leveling. They're going to keep leveling, whereas Volk is level capped. And Volk doesn't promote until, I believe, chapter 20 or 21. At that point, I've had units hit like level 10 promoted or level 5 promoted, depending on how many units I was using and how much XP I was giving to each of them and how much combat they were carrying in the maps. So they could be much higher than that. I don't think we want to get into like how much stronger they are when they're level, like, I don't know, level 20/5. Let's take a different unit again. So let's take Makalov 20/5 versus Volk 29. Oh, we need to give him a weapon. Makalov can use steel axes after promotion, so we can give him that one of those. There you go. Makalov, before we even forge a steel axe, has 10 attack. He has the same speed. And then, yeah, again, Volk is more accurate. But again, Makalov doesn't really have any issues with this. If he does, you can forge the steel axe. You can use an iron axe. You can use something better. If you're up against a dodgy enemy, he has weapon triangle control a little bit. So if Makalov is up against a sword enemy, he can switch to a sword instead of using an axe if you want to. Those are like dodgy enemies. That's something you can do if you want to. Or just use an iron axe for more hit. Those are options that Makalov has. Volk cannot switch to anything else. He can use a knife. Now, something you might want to bring up in response to these comparisons is that I'm comparing an unpromoted Volk versus a promoted unit, or that I'm comparing units with forged weapons versus a unit that has unforged weapons. And you might contest that that is not fair because I'm not giving them equal levels or resources. And to compare units fairly, I should do that. So you could compare them to like equal levels, for example. But I'm trying to compare units how they are in the game. This is the reality of their situation. Volk cannot physically promote. It's not legal for Volk to physically promote until he does so. Other units can promote earlier, and it would be not fair to just ignore that. That is just completely ignoring a part of the game mechanics, if I were to compare them in a way that doesn't reflect the in-game reality. And if you think that is unfair, that is not my fault. That is what the developers did to Volk and the other units in the game. And I'm sorry that your favorite unit got shafted that way, but it wasn't my idea. You do get stilettos. Oh, I did forget to promote Volk for the chapter 21 comparison, because that's when he promotes. That's kind of what I wanted to do, wasn't it? You do also get stilettos at around that point, which is a big of a stronger knife. You can also check weapon stats in this. So if you look at the AP9 knife, it's 2 might, which is very, very weak. And then you have the stiletto. So from getting stilettos, Volk will get +6 attack, which is significant for him because it's a lot better. It also has 5 more crit for what that's worth, and it's a little bit heavier, but that doesn't matter. So it is +6 attack is pretty huge for Volk. So if we look at Volk as a level 21 unit with a stiletto, it's already pretty improved. Like, it's better. It's still not gonna kill enemies around that point in the game, I'm pretty sure. I looked at the enemy stats earlier, and he does not kill anything but maybe mages, if I recall correctly. But if we compare Volk to 21 Stiletto, we could just grab the same Makalov again, honestly, and see how that compares. Makalov 25 Steel Axe. Yeah, you can see here, Makalov is +2 attack, and Volk has +2 attack speed. And I'm pretty sure Makalov with, 19 attack speed still doubles everything that is relevant. Also, this doesn't factor in the fact that Makalov can level up with the Night Ward weapon or item equipped. That gives him 30% extra speed growth, which at this point would net him, let's say, around like 10 extra levels with that thing on. So that's like 3 extra points of speed that he just gets for free. If I did the math right. Yeah. So then he'd actually be faster than Volk at this point, which is kind of outrageous. So that's Makalov. Not even like Kieran or Oscar or Titania or Boyd or one of the other star units you have, or Ike at that point. Just Makalov. Just a guy. Something else that often gets brought up in defense of Volk is that he is a very dodgy character because he's very fast. And it is true that he has a high speed stat, theoretically, and an okay luck stat, I guess. But he doesn't dodge reliably. I looked at over the enemy stats, in hard mode at least, and generally he has around a 50-50 shot at dodging things. That is just kind of how the math shakes out with the avoid that he has. He starts with around 30 avoid. If you look at his speed real quick again, at base, 9 Volk. At base has 13 speed and 7 luck, so that's 26 speed from, or 26 avoid from 13 speed, because every point of speed is 2 avoid, and every point of luck is 1 avoid, so that's 26 plus 7 is 33 avoid. And a lot of enemies will have around 100 or like around 80 to 90 hit, so they'll have around 50-50 shot to hit him or better. And then later on, if you cap his level at 20, he has closer to 20 speed. So let's say 20 speed is 40 avoid and then plus 10 from luck. So that's 50 avoid. And then enemies around that point, when he is level 20, have around 100 hit. So it kind of shakes up the same. His avoid will probably go up a bit more as he promotes, but in his unpromoted time at least, that is the avoid you can expect him to have. Is around 50-50 shot at avoiding enemies. Which is like, it might be a bit more than your other units, but it also means that in practice, you can't leave Volk in range of like 2 enemies that are 2 at KOing him, because there's a 1 in 4 chance he'll just die. So in practice, you have to play as if he doesn't have any chance to avoid at all. And then if he gets lucky, that's good. I guess you don't have to heal him, but it's not a massive benefit. Whereas a unit with like actual reliable avoid, like, I don't know, promoted Zyhark, or I don't know, someone else, they might actually be able to put that dodge tank into use. But for Volk, it's just, basically it's a chance to get lucky. And if you overexpose him, it's a chance to get really lucky. But it doesn't really help him survive, practically speaking. Makes for fun animations, though. And Makalov is a clown face guy. Like, I don't even like Makalov. If you like Volk's face more than Makalov's face, feel free to use Volk's face instead. It might be more entertaining for you. It might be more fun. But it's not arguable that Volk's combat is better than Makalov's, or really almost anyone's in this game. I do think Volk's combat is better than Rolf's. I think it's better than Mist and Reese before they promote, because they can't counterattack. I think Volk is also... I also think Volk is good. Don't get me wrong. I think Volk is a good unit to use, because he can steal physics at base. That's what his good strength is for. He can steal physics. He can open some blocks. He can open some chests. If you see like random vulneraries or elixirs on enemies, you can steal those. Any random staffs that are unequipped, steal those with Volk. Deploy him if you have a use for thief or for thievery. Particularly, it's nicer to use Volk over Soth, because Soth has much worse stats. So if you make a mistake, you put Volk in enemy range, he's much more likely to survive than Soth is. If you have like enemies with long range tomes like Meteor or Bolting or Blizzard, or maybe like longbows or ballistas, or just you missed an enemy range somewhere, it's much easier to survive with Volk than it is with Soth. And also, the enemies might not even attack Volk because of a Shade skill, which lowers the priority for enemies to attack him. They might still do it if they think they can kill him. It's not like completely good as a failsafe, but it's just an extra barrier he has to dying that Soth doesn't have. Soth just has much worse stats. I don't even need to show that. You guys know Soth has worse stats. He also joins a bit later for some reason. Soth also doesn't promote in this game. Like, this doesn't promote at all. So Volk is the better thief between the two. And the 50 gold that Volk charges really doesn't matter, because you get so much gold in this game. You can afford anything you want, buy almost anything you want, and open every lock you have with Volk, and it's not going to make a single bit of difference in there. And if it does, he probably just makes up for it anyway, because he gets you treasure that is worth more than the 50 gold that he takes. So that is not an issue at all. The issue I have with Volk is purely combat based. If you use him for combat, you're going to get worse results than from other units. The question is, I guess, that the last question I want to ask, I guess, is how much does it matter that Volk is worse at combat? Does it matter that he's not as good as other units? The answer is yes and no. So it doesn't matter in the sense that anyone can use whoever they want, and I don't have an issue with it. That's fine. I have no issues with anyone using Volke. What I have problems with is telling new people that Volke is good at combat or a good investment for bonus experience, or that his stats make up for his low might on knives. I don't think any of those things are true, and I don't think we should say that to new players because it's going to give them the wrong idea, spread misconceptions, and we really don't need that. There's also a bunch of people in the thread saying that like Mist and Rolf were worth the investment, which is another topic altogether that I don't entirely agree with. Like, well, Rolf was good for me, stuff like that. I don't think we should say those things to new players. I think we should be honest about how units compare to each other and what they can expect from these units, and that way they can make a more informed choice on what they want to use. And if you want to say, oh, my Rolf was good, or I enjoy using Rolf, that's a different thing from saying you should use Rolf, he's really good, he was really powerful for me. Part of that, I think, is that Fire Emblem gives you units that are really, really good at base, and then gives you units that aren't as good at base. And the implication that the game gives you is like, this is worth it. Like, this unit is worse now, but they'll be better later. There's like a tiny print somewhere. Whatever starts bad is going to end up better than the units that end up good. And a lot of the time in Fire Emblem, that's just not true. A lot of the times, the good units that start good are just good at that. And the new player identified that. Like, if we go back to the thread real quick, we go back here, and they're like, sorry to the Mist and Rolf supporters, the joints are underpowered and they're not worth it. They made a correct assessment for themselves. Now, they could be worth it for novelty reasons, they could be worth it for story reasons, and there's even like a reason in the game to use Mist that has nothing to do with her stats, and it's that she's force deployed in a battle later on where you can't use it, but that battle is optional. You don't have to do that battle, and it might not be worth it for a new player to slog through all the way. So the advice you give to new players is, in my opinion, for these units, is like, well, use Volke for thievery and not for combat. Use Mist if you like her, if you want to use her in this forced battle or this optional battle where she is force deployed, and if you want to do that, you can totally do that. But if you don't feel like using her for the entire game, just for that one battle, then don't bother. And Rolf starts off kind of bad, or Rolf starts out very weak, I think is the better term to use than bad. Bad is kind of like very negative connotations. I think weak is a better way to put it. Rolf starts out weak, and he doesn't end up much stronger or stronger at all than his peers, but the novelty is using a unit that starts with that and eventually becomes competent. That's the real reward for using Rolf, is you get to use someone that starts like weak and becomes better. But it's not because it's worth it that you should use Rolf. The reason you should use Rolf is because you enjoy Rolf as a character, because you enjoy the concept of training a weak unit into a less weak unit or a competent unit, or because you want to use the triangle attack or something like that. Those are the reasons to use Rolf, and they're good reasons. They're as good reasons as any. And this is also, I think, adjacent to the subject of like, do experienced players tell new players who they can and cannot use? No, they don't have any jurisdiction in the Fire Emblem area. They don't do that. They don't say you can't do that. But what annoys some of the experienced players is people that say things that are just factually wrong, or if they're like more opinions that cannot be wrong necessarily, they'll just like say the facts in such a way that it really stretches the truth to a breaking point. I think that's the kindest way I can phrase it. Rolf is not good at combat. Volke is not good at combat. It's okay to use units that are not good at combat, but we might as well be honest about whether they are good at combat or not if we're going to recommend things to new players. That's my TED Talk. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you all next time.